Hey watch friends, almost exactly 1 year after the launch of the wildly popular Loresum LS04 moon phase, they're back with a follow-up model, the LS05. As you're going to see, there's going to be a fair amount of similarities, but a whole heck of a lot of differences between these as well. So we'll go ahead and explore and unpack them. First, this is going to be launching tentatively on February 24th of 2025. The launch price is going to be starting almost the exact same as the LS04 at only $599. That's going to be on Kickstarter, and I'll of course have a link down the video description. Standard, this comes with a 2-year warranty. The case is actually going to be the same as the LS04, but we'll quickly revisit the specs. Measured from roughly the 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock position, you're looking at 39.5 millimeters. The bezel steps down almost exactly 2 millimeters at 37.5 millimeters. The lugs remain a strap change friendly 20 millimeters. The lug to lug is 46.5 millimeters. The total thickness is coming in at 11.2 millimeters. However, that is inclusive of this, as you can see, box edge sapphire crystal, which that adds about 2 millimeters. So what I have found is this wears much thinner than the 11.2, though 11.2 isn't very thick either. As far as the crystal itself, it is a very subtly domed, that is a double dome, box edge sapphire crystal, and it does feature AR coating as well. The movement on this is going to be the same as it was on the LS04, and that is a Miyota 9015. However, as I'm sure you can pick up on, as you can see, the date is not present, and that's because it's been replaced with a Pairings moon phase module. That is a true moon phase module, so what that means for you is you're going to get everything that you would expect from a Miyota 9015, higher beat, 28,800 beats per hour, around a 42-hour power reserve, automatic hacking, hand winding, all that kind of good stuff. But additionally though, instead of the date, you're going to get that 29.5 day moon phase that is incorporated in here. The water resistance is coming in at 50 meters or 5 atmospheres. While certainly that's not going to be the highest in the world for this styling, I think it's sufficient. And then the weight on this included strap is coming in at 66.1 grams. So just a hair heavier than I was getting on the prior one, but it's well within the margin of error. So with that being said, let's go ahead and explore this further, get a better feel for this particular model, and really see what's different, what's similar, all that kind of good stuff. First, for the colors. This is initially going to be launched in 2 different versions. There's the blue version that we're looking at today, and then there's additionally a black version. There's also 3 stretch gold variants currently planned. There's a black with rose gold accents, there is a green with rose gold accents, and there's additionally a very gorgeous light blue color as well. One of the things that you're going to notice as you look through each of these is they really shifted over from the LS04 with that full aventurine layout in the singular large moon to now you're looking at a completely different layout. So here you're looking at somewhat of it's still going to have the starry sky aesthetic, especially the nighttime sky and the darker variants. But with that though, they're now changing it up. So you're going to have in the middle of this kind of sector layout, you have railroad track type guilloche pattern that's running around that perimeter there. As you move out to the far edge, you're going to see that this has like a satin extension of that. So it changes up similar color in application, but with a different pattern applied. And then in the middle, between those two, for that sector ring, you're going to see that this does still carry through with the aventurine. So they're making the aventurine, instead of being the showcase, now it is going to be more of an accent touch for this, which I think is a cool way to change this up. As you move to the middle, this is one of the biggest areas where this one is going to differ. You can now see, instead of having a large single moon at the top for that cutout, and we'll check out the LS04 next to this, they actually continued through, so it still has your 3D mother of pearl that is a lumed moon, but now you're actually going to have the dual moon. So what this represents is at the top towards the 12, you're looking at the northern hemisphere representation, and then down at the 6 o'clock position staggered over towards the 8, you are looking at the southern hemisphere. So really you don't have to choose any longer as to which moon you see, and it's just a compelling and interesting look. As far as the application, you can see with the railroad track, they did still apply little lume stars, and that actually carries through and is pretty cohesive with the daytime sparkle look of the aventurine, where you get that kind of starry effect for it. So I think that's really attractive there. And then the same thing is true on the actual moon discs as well. Just like with the past one, they do have nice framing applied to this. This is polished framing, only here you're going to see instead of framing just that moon cutout, this is actually going to be that sector layout there. So it really partitions off each of the respective layers in different textures that you have, which I think brings the look together. And then out on the edge, you can see that this does still have a true chapter ring. So you're going to have your larger dots at the 5-minute increments and then your smaller dots in between. So you have nice, easy hashes for retaining precision legibility. As far as the hardware, they did change up the handset on this. You are now looking at what I would describe as being like a custom Dauphine style handset. So you are looking at the traditional Dauphine shape. It does additionally have that kind of faceting effect going on. It is full polished, but one of the things that's easy to miss is down at the base, it does actually have skeletonization as well. And I think that that's a nice way to break things up. Additionally, it does have the Lume, which especially against these darker backgrounds does give good contrast, so you keep legibility even when you pick up like darker reflectivity that might otherwise wash out against the dial. You still have plenty going on. But with those facets, I find that as you move it around, you usually do have some kind of light play that's going on, so it's fairly easy to pick up. As far as the second hand, they changed this one up. So now you're looking at what I would describe as sort of a very long, like spear or sword type layout. You will notice that it tapers towards the actual pinion there, which that's a pretty cool look. Additionally, they did away with the blue that we saw on the prior one, and this one now is just going to be the full polish for that as well. And I personally like this look better. I actually like this handset better overall, so I'm pleased with that as well. Once you shift over to the markers, one of the things that's really neat here is you're going to see that with being applied to the rings that you have there, this actually gives kind of that like floating index or floating marker effect. So you're looking at trapezoidal markers. They do have kind of a waterfall edge on the exterior as well as still having on the interior that framing for it. So I think that that's a very cool look as well, but I really like that floating effect in the way that that works with this overall dial. Shifting over to the Lume on this is going to be a generous application as far as where it is applied. So you have, of course, on your indexes as well as your hour and minute hand. You also have the moon, and then you've got those star accents as well. One of the things you're going to notice, though, on this prototype is that this particular one is really lacking when it comes to the hands. They definitely do not keep up with performance compared to the moon or markers, but that is something that they're aware of, and hence with this being a prototype, they are working to have that enhanced. So I'd like the overall layout and application. I think this has a lot of promise and potential for it, but I really do want to see that kicked up, but we will revisit that one. Additionally, because you do have some different textures going on here, you do get nice light play as you transition across lighting for it. Of course, you get that aventurine twinkle when the light hits it right, but then additionally with having the guilloche type texture and patterning, you do get some light play there as well. Shifting over to the bezel, this one again, just like with the last one, is going to be a fixed construction. It is set back as we already saw. It is a very thin bezel application for this, so you can see that that nicely disappears. But what's nice is because it does have that polished accent for it with that lip, you don't get too much polish. It is a nice delicate touch in there, but it really does break up the lines and I think bridges the gap nicely. You're going to get a mix of both the brush and polish. It's going to continue with the higher slope, just like we had before. And then additionally, it does still achieve that kind of stepped effect. You can notice that there's like a ledge for the case, a ledge for the bezel, and then a ledge for the crystal as well. So I think that that's a really cool look to that, and I'm still pleased with that. I like that on the last one, and it still carries through here. As far as the case, as I already mentioned, this case is going to be the same as LS04. So for those who have handled, we'll of course look for a comparison for those who haven't, but otherwise it's going to be the same things that you would expect from that, which is to say it's an extremely thin case here. That really, I mean, putting that next to my finger, you can get an idea as to just how thin that is because it's easy to lose perspective on camera, but it is very, very thin at the mid case. It does continue just like before, with principally going to be brushing here. You can see that that does have horizontal brushing that runs the length of the case. You do have nice polished chamfer cuts, which not only add visual interest, but additionally, though, I do think that they make it seem even a little bit thinner with having that broken edge. You do still have a downturn to the lugs. As you can see, it's a relatively flat case shape, but it does have that little bit of flowing arch out that does come pretty much flush with the case back. So that's nicely incorporated there as well. As you shift over to the lugs, you can see the lugs here, just like before, are going to be a nice thin tapered lug type design for that. One thing that is nice that I will mention, previously we had a con as to the straps were so far out on that. They had actually in production addressed that on the LS04. So in the prototype we previously looked at, there was a pretty big gap between the case and that because of where it was set. They actually now have 2 holes in there. So you have the ability for, if you have a real thick strap, you can go on the outer holes. If you have a somewhat thinner strap, you can go in the inner holes. And the same thing is, it actually allowed for a bracelet that we'll check out here shortly as well. On the 3 o'clock side, you can see just like in the past, there is no crown guard for this, which again, I think is in keeping with the design and the style. As far as the crown itself, this is coming in at 6.3 millimeters. It remains a push-pull construction. It still has a coin edge for it. And additionally, it is signed on the exterior, and I think that's a good incorporation of the signature. No problems with gripping a hold of that. Very easy to grab a hold of, and you can pop it, you can twist it, all that kind of stuff. No issues. Shifting over to the caseback. The caseback on this is a screw-in construction. It is going to be principally brushed as far as the actual caseback itself, but then on the back of the case, you can see that has your brushing that brings in, so it really does break things up there. You do have an exhibition window in the middle, and then while they do have a custom rotor, this is going to look like a pretty basic Miota 9015. The customization is minimal, mainly just has their branding as well as that pattern applied to that, so nothing really to write home about here on the back, but it's similar and it's familiar. As far as the bracelet, as you can see here on my 6.5-inch wrist, this case I think sits very nicely on the wrist. This included strap here is 20 millimeters at the lugs, and it does taper down to 16 millimeters at the buckle. There are actually multiple styles of this that are available for these leather options that is going to come standard with, so you can pick which style that you want. There's not only some different color options, but you can additionally go with this like textured Epsom style. They've got an alligator style. They've got a smoother texture that's available that has a more noticeable ridge in the middle, so you've got a little bit of something for everyone there. Additionally, there is a bracelet that, as I mentioned, we'll be checking out here shortly. As far as the straps themselves, they are going to include quick release spring bars on the back, so you can change those around for whatever is suiting to your particular taste, and they fit my wrist just fine. As far as the buckles, this is going to be, again, the same type of buckle design as we had in the past. You're going to have it is signed. It is a fairly interesting shape for that. Doesn't look like your standard or generic styling, and then it does have a nice mix of your brush and polish application to bring it through and to carry through with the case design and style as well. All right, so that should hopefully give you a much better feel for this particular one, as well as some of the comparisons for the LS04, but we've talked about it a fair amount. Let's go ahead and actually bring one in. So here it is next to the LS04. As you can see, this is going to be the same as far as the case and those kind of pieces, and this is a production version here versus the prototype. But what you'll really notice is the dial does present completely differently. You've got a larger single moon versus the slightly smaller double moon. Obviously different layout as far as the full aventurine application. You can see a very different style for the handset, all that kind of good stuff. But one of the big things I want to show you here is this bracelet. Again, with being the same case, this is actually the exact same bracelet that you'll have an option for this in the Kickstarter campaign. It's either going to be an add-on, or they are considering adding these as an option where you can just select a reward that already includes the bracelet with it, which I'm hoping they do go that route, because I think this is excellent. This, to me, is the way to wear it. There's nothing wrong with the leather straps as well. But that gives you an idea there with the blue aventurine. Just to make it a little more complete, since there are some versions that do have black aventurine as well, this just gives you an idea as that blue next to the black. In this lighting, it's not necessarily the best for picking up the full. This does pick up a little more of like a violet coloration to it, but that gives you an idea as to what to expect there. So that is the LS04 black. Sticking with the aventurine theming, here it is next to a Zelos Comet. This gives you an idea as far as sizing and scale. I think these two stack up pretty similarly as far as overall sizing and presence for them. And actually the case shapes are obviously different, but they read pretty similarly, I think, on the case shape as well. But there's the Comet aventurine. And then finally, just bringing it up next to a smaller new one. This is the upcoming Dorenzo DRZ07 Universo. We recently unboxed this one, but it gives you an idea here as far as a little bit smaller as to how these two compare for sizing there. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and wrap things up with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the summary. First, for the positives. Just like in the past, I think this value is exceptional. They are coming out at the same price, so of course the value is still going to be good there. I really don't think they've taken anything away. It just becomes a stylistic choice, but everything that made this great value at $600 before continues now with a bespoke Barons module, with great finishing, as we'll talk about here, all those kind of pieces, still excellent. The thinness, this really, to me, can't be overstated as to how nice that is on the wrist. There's something special about wearing a nice thin watch. I don't think it needs to be obnoxiously thin, which is kind of the case here. This is what I would consider to be a thin overall watch, but with having the sapphire crystal and everything, it's not necessarily going to be overall specs that blow you away, but it wears very thin on the wrist, and that's excellent. The styling, to me, I think is tasteful, yet striking. Here you've got a lot going on. Certainly there is a bit of busyness to the dial, but I think it works really well. I think it actually looks more like bespoke or higher-end horology here as far as the styling, not just with the complications and those kind of pieces, but I think the aesthetic they pulled off very well, so I'm pleased with that. And then the finishing, just like we saw in the past, this finishing, despite the fact that this is a prototype, and of course we have productions, the LS04 we just saw, the finishing's excellent. I mean, at the $600 price point, really nothing to complain about there at all, so that's great. But what about some critiques? We already mentioned the primary one. There's really only a couple because they've addressed a lot of these, and since this really is a refinement of the LS04 as far as its weaknesses with a different dial layout, the biggest one is going to be the Lume strength. As I mentioned, the handset here was changing and trying a new handset. Love the handset they chose for this, and I think that's a step in the right direction. Absolutely needs stronger Lume applied there on the production version, which again, that's something I know they intend to address, but that is definitely a weakness right now. And then, this is something it carried over from the past one as well. But the movement on the back here, I wouldn't have minded if they went to a closed caseback if it got you a little bit of thinness for it. Otherwise, I would have liked to have seen them do something a little more fresh, a little more new with the custom rotor here, just to make this a little more decorated. If you're going to have the exhibition window, certainly nothing wrong with it, but I do think they could have elevated that, especially when you look at something like the Selton, where they have absolutely gorgeous rotors for that. This one, it's a little bit on the basic side. It looks like a typical Miyota 9 series, but those are pretty minor items for it, and those are really because so many of the other things have been addressed, I have to kind of nitpick here for some of those pieces. So where does that leave us? As you might expect, I love the LS04, and accordingly, I love the LS05. It's going to have all the characteristics and properties that we liked about the last one as far as how it wears on wrist, the thinness, the overall aesthetic, and it really, to me, is just going to come down to, do you like this style? Because this is a pretty big departure from the last one. Not just the double moon complication, but also less eventering. There are going to be some people, I think, that are actually going to much more appreciate this, because the other one can be pretty sparkly, pretty glittery, and that's going to be polarizing, whereas conversely, there's going to be other people who love eventering and they want more of it, and accordingly, the LS04 is going to be a better fit for them. But whichever one you choose, I really don't think you can go wrong for the money. I think they're great styled watches, great quality watches, and definitely have no problem giving them a recommendation. I do highly recommend throwing them on the bracelet though. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If you did enjoy this, please do tap that like button. If you haven't already done so, smash the subscribe button. Most importantly, drop me a comment. Let me know what you think. Which of these versions do you like, the blue or the black? Are you hoping for one of the stretch goals? Do you like the LS04 or the LS05 better? All that kind of good stuff. Thanks for watching.